Produced by Podcast Architects.
Welcome back to another episode of The Path Forward here at TASA Midwinter in Austin, Texas. I'm your host, Dr. Rick Fernandez. We have a special guest joining us, friend of the program, Sealy Tiger, Superintendent Sealy ISD, Dr. Bryan Hallmark. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Rick.
Well, we've braved the weather, the icy roads. We're here. We're at a great conference. I got to ask you, from an attendee perspective, were there any sessions that really sparked your interest?
I think there were several. I think, it's a legislative year. So,
Yes, it is.
So anything regarding legislative updates, you're kind of like,
Yeah.
okay, we got to figure this thing out and where we're going. But then went to a session on the teacher incentive allotment that Kerrville ISD did.
Okay.
And they've got some good things going on down there. And that's it's one of those pieces where there's a lot of unknowns about doing the teacher incentive allotment,
right,
how that impacts culture and those type things. But then it's also like what an awesome opportunity to award someone who is a phenomenal teacher.
Absolutely. So speaking of the teacher incentive allotment, I've had colleagues go through that process. I've investigated that process. There's got to be a balance there, right? Because obviously you want to reward, but you also have to think about the snowball effect. And I know you are already doing some great things to figure out, how to maintain that pipeline of teachers. I know you work with Hartwell University. What other leadership sessions really spark your interest? I know the priorities, but also just from your own personal learning.
I think one of the things, for me personally, some of the best learning I get is talking with colleagues from around the state.
Yeah.
And it's not always from a session, because there are lots of people that are having unique challenges in their district. And although your district's unique and, things that go on in your community are very much about, they only happen in your community, but there are lots of similarities too. And it's just
Absolutely
great to be able to pique someone's, pick their brain, figure out, maybe how they've navigated an issue that you see that's coming in your district and those type things. And that's always fun. And then we had, I thought Brene Brown yesterday was great.
Yeah, she's unbelievable.
Great keynote.
Yeah.
That's,
How do you top that, right?
Right.
No, she's outstanding. Let's go back to the district level. Sealy ISD, what's going on in Sealy?
So we are, we're in the middle of doing a lot of work in the area of teaching and learning. We went through a strategic planning process.
Okay.
Started it this time last year, just finished in the fall.
Yep.
And it was great, great process. We had conversations with about 400 staff and community
Wow.
members. And from there kind of set a direction for the district. Like, what is our picture of success? What do we want to be 5 to 7 years down the road? And it's very refreshing when the community wants something great for their kids.
Absolutely.
And they're willing to support us in doing it. And so it's, from that process, it's like, okay, we have a direction. Now it's like, okay, well, what are the targets and goals to get us there? And then what's the evidence that works?
Right. Yeah, we got to execute the plan. Is there any nugget that came out of there that you were like, I've never considered that. That's interesting. That's a great perspective from either the community or the staff.
I think one of the things that stood out to me was just that, like, and I don't think it's isolated to Sealy, but because of all of the social media platforms,
right,
technology, instant access to whatever, Amazon.
Yeah.
I mean, you could literally never leave your house,
That's
right?
true.
You get groceries, everything.
Everything.
And so just that, like, let's get back to that sense of community.
Mm-hmm.
And, when the school is the focal point of that. And so that was a really resounding message from our community. Like, let's figure out a way to get back to that.
You know what? That's great that you're hearing that, because oftentimes, your communities, everybody's got a little bit of a different priority, right? And obviously they're worried about their kids, or they're worried about their interest within the school district. How do you leverage both, right? Because I know 100% you're trying to keep that sense of community, the Sealy tradition, but also we always have to be responsive to the technology and how that's growing and shifting. Is there a way that you can think that you would leverage both of those? Like, we're going to use this vehicle to enhance that feeling of community.
I think you have to do that.
Yeah.
And whether we like it or not, technology's not going anywhere. And I think that is the thing that we always talk about internally is like we used to hold all the knowledge.
Yes.
When me and you were in school, hey, here's your textbook, and if you can't find it there, go check out an encyclopedia.
That's right.
Right?
The Britannica.
Yeah. and the reality now is our kids have access to all of this information.
Instantaneously.
Yeah. Whenever they want it. And you've got the AI chat thing going
Yeah.
on. It'll write a paper for you in like 45 seconds and all of those things. And it's like we can push back against that, or we can embrace the fact that our kids have all this knowledge, and then how do we help them navigate that knowledge? What's good, what's bad, what's accurate, what's inaccurate, and all of those things, because whether we like it or not, our kids have to curate things now, and that's the world they're going to live in. And I think even for people like us that are parents now in the community, we've kind of grown accustomed to that instant access.
Yes, we have.
And so for us, like where those two things merge is how we communicate,
Mm-hmm.
and when we get people information. Because if I can research how to pick out different customizations for a vehicle I'm going to buy, for instance, color scheme and all that online, but you can't communicate to me how my kid's doing in your classroom online. Like
Right. Yeah.
People get frustrated.
Absolutely.
And so it's like, how do we hit all of those communication points using various tools? And we're not perfect at it, but I think we've come a long ways.
So you bring up a great point with Chat, GPT, and the OpenAI, and there's been a lot of fear, higher ed and K-12, about we got to shut it down. Kids are cheating. It can do this. It can do that. And it is refreshing to hear an educator say, look, we can either, rebel and try not to utilize it, or we can figure out how we adapt to it and leverage it, because whether we like it or not, like you said, our kids are going to have to utilize it.
100%. And like one of the things that I ask myself, because when you hear things like that, and like, wow, you could cheat, you could do all these things, but the reality is, like, are we coming from a place where we're trying to control the knowledge that our kids get, and we can't do that anymore?
That's 100%.
And so I think about myself, like there have been instances in the last couple of years when I'm doing a project at home, or heck, even helping my kid with math homework. You get online, you get on YouTube, and you figure it out. And I mean,
guilty as charged.
Go get on YouTube and figure out how to fix your car, and you do it. And so, what our kids are doing is no different than that.
No,
it's just an academic application, and so we're much better off teaching them how to decipher that information. And there's part of me as an educator, man, as long as our kids are getting that knowledge and getting educated. For example, if what we ask our kids to do with that knowledge probably needs to change.
Right.
For example, if kids writing a paper using AI chat, well, maybe it's not just writing a paper anymore. Maybe it's presenting on that.
Yes.
Because whether they write that paper, and there are skills they need to develop, no doubt, but if they're really processing that information and can use that to explain to you and show their learning,
mm-hmm.
then
what are we complaining about?
They're better off for it.
Exactly. 100. I could not agree more. If anything, it should force us to evaluate our assessment and think about what we're asking in terms of application, because businesses are already figuring out how does this make our life easier, right? And what skills will our employees need to leverage this to make their clients' jobs and lives easier? So guess what? When kids come out of schools, they're going to be expected to learn how to leverage. If it's not this, Google. I mean, I Google stuff all the time.
It's kind of funny. I was talking to Kevin Hodgins at Google the other day and ran into him at the conference, and he made the comment to me like, we get to interview some of the smartest people in the world.
Right.
And he said, but we hire problem solvers. And, you know,
Yeah.
our kids are going to use some of those technologies to solve their problems.
100%. It's not always the representation of academia in the letter grades, right? I mean, we fuss at the state for their accountability system, but that's what the world's about. Is we've got this problem, and who's got the solution, and who provides it to their client, their customer, their school, in the most efficient and user-friendly way.
100%.
Regardless of what that is. Now the question is, because I love that, and I'm glad, selfishly, I'm glad that we're very much aligned on that. How do we reduce the fear of our teachers that are, and rightfully, I mean, I get it, right? We've had this process, and now all of that work and all of that training could be navigated very easily, and I may not know what a kid understands about the content. How do we remove that fear from our teachers and even our administrators at times?
I think that is, I think that's $1 million question.
Yeah.
You know? But I think a lot of it goes to communication, being really clear what we want our kids to leave us with.
Sure.
And trying to find that balance of, you know, for example, if I'm asking you to write a research paper or compare and contrast something,
Right.
and a computer AI can spit that out in 45 seconds, but I still need you to be able to organize your thoughts, to do some of those things. And so what we ask kids to do and show mastery of that probably needs to look a little different, and we may not be able to rely, if we want our kids to acquire those skills, we may not be able to rely on the same types of assignments that we've asked them to do forever.
So do you think this makes a stronger, even stronger case for more of the project-based learning instruction, where, you know, it's all problem solving using a variety of tools to have this outcome of a project? Do you think we're going to be shifting even further that way?
I think there's going to be a big push for that, and if you look at what kids want, you know, like we talk about engagement in our district, and we use a lot of the philosophical work of Phil Schlechte on that. But when we talk about, like, you talk about engagement, and when I was a teacher, and sadly when I was a young administrator, I thought engagement was, you know, you're giving me your time and attention.
Right.
And it's so much deeper than that, because there's the committed and persistent piece. And when we ask kids to solve authentic problems, then they're going to engage even when they struggle.
Right.
And I think that's the difference. Now we have a lot of compliant kids, and there's
Absolutely.
a lot of strategic and ritual compliant, and hey, I'm going to do this to get a grade, to do these things. But then when the struggle ensues, then it's like, ooh, I don't know if I want to do this. And
Yep.
and then furthermore, you know, you talked about grading a little bit earlier. For some of those kids, if you're being compliant to chase a GPA, which is a reality for our kids,
Absolutely,
right?
100%.
But if you're being ritually or strategically compliant to chase GPA, then when our system challenges you with something, and maybe you don't get that A, and you get a B, or you have to rework, that's a big friction point.
No
in
doubt.
Education. But if we really want kids to be problem solvers, they're going to have to be challenged with complex problems that they're not going to master the first time. And if they do, are they really learning?
100%. So reframing it for the parents is going to be even more critical, because, like you said, you know, parents start and kids start with their goals and the chasing the GPA, and every district has a GPA game. No matter where you are, it is what it is, and parents adjust accordingly. If we remove some of those carrots that have always been in place, and it's a little bit chaotic, you know, people will be uncomfortable because they don't know what comes next. They don't know how to measure their success. They don't know what this means. When in reality, the problems should represent what they're going to see when they leave us.
Absolutely.
And if those aren't aligned, then what are we really providing them with, you know?
And I'll tell you right now, one of my biggest fears is for a kid to go through our education system, and the first time they experience failure is in life. because sometimes in life you don't get second chances and all those. Like we should be able to create an incubator space where you push yourself to your max, and it's okay to fail forward, get back up, iterate.
Yep.
Because
Figure it out.
at the end of the day, whether or not you learned it is most important, not whether or not you learned it the first time. And like I said earlier, heck, if you're learning it the first time, are you really learning?
Exactly. Or is it leveled? Is it leveled appropriately?
Yeah.
Right. All right. So I want your thought on this. So one of the things I believe is the biggest barrier for educators, it's not really change. I mean, yes, change is hard, and it's particularly when you're moving big systems. But I think more so it's the acceleration, the rate of change. I think not only is it change, which is difficult, but it's so fast, and it's now becoming constant from 1 year to the next, one semester to the next.
Yep.
I mean, we're going to get to a point where it comes down to weekly, to monthly, where we're having to adjust based on the change, whether it's the job market, the technology, how kids learn, what's available to us. How do we begin to understand we've got to be more nimble? And we proved that we can through COVID. But there was no other way. So the necessity provided the urgency to do it.
When I look at our own education system in Sealy, and you think about, yes, we need to be more nimble, more flexible. We need to be able to pivot. All of those things, and the pandemic exposed some of that. Right. But then you also brought up technology and market changes and all that. Like, the world is spinning much faster now.
Yes.
when it comes to those things. And so, but when I look at our system, it's like, okay, how do we support our educators in doing that? Because it's not that they don't want to change, and that if you ask any teacher out there, they would do anything for our kids to be successful. Right. But they're going to have to work in a different way too. But my question to myself is, does our system support that? Because if we have policies and procedures in place that are causing you to be rigid and not give you the flexibility to change, well, that's where it starts.
Right.
And for example, you mentioned, problem-based or project-based learning earlier, and so teachers aren't going to do that kind of learning in their classroom if I'm telling them, hey, you got to have 12 grades, and
every 6 weeks,
4 of them need to be major grades, and 8 of them need to be daily grades, and all of those things. Like, that's just an example of how our system perpetuates that that ability where you can't be flexible.
How much of it is because it's what we experienced as school students? And I bring up the example of career in tech, right? Because I've been through where I'm trying to reframe it for parents, because as we experienced it maybe as shop or wood shop or something of that nature, but it's always viewed in a certain light. Like, all right, these are for those kids that aren't going to college. But I think it's because of the way we've experienced it when we were in school. So that's what we think it still is, as opposed to what it really is, which is high wage, high skilled career accreditation and industry certification. How do we get our mental block? Because ultimately we're still making the decision. Our generations are trying to lay the groundwork for the future generations. But we still have the mental block of we're stuck with either the grade system or how do we get off that?
I think we've got to change what we value inside of our schools. I mean, whether I like it or not, every policy that we have in Sealy right now is telling you that we value advanced academics. We value you playing that GPA game. All of those things, and there's some merit to that.
Sure.
And for some kids, that's
the right choice for some kids.
That's the right choice.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know what it looks like today. But about 3 years ago, I know that 70% of kids graduating from a trade school were making more than kids graduating with a bachelor's degree.
Yep.
And so, we've kind of as a society in education, I think to some extent we've in the past we looked down on some of these professions.
No question.
Right?
Blue collar.
Yeah, and the reality is those are very, very skilled jobs out there and professions. And I think too, one of the things that we need to start doing is looking at there are different areas of smartness, right?
Oh, without it. I mean, I have to go to YouTube to do any of that stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, to even get close to doing it right. So,
but we value smartness in, well, you're smart at math.
Yeah. Right.
You have some kind of a language ability where you're a great writer,
right.
You're a great reader. But there are other smartness profiles out there too that
no question.
People have gifts, and it's just maybe not in an area that we've rewarded in academics.
That nail on the head. We have not rewarded that creativity or that intellectual capability because we've not really understood how that looks. I think we can easily say, all right, the SAT score this and GPA in this, and you equate it with the number without thinking through, all right, this project requires a lot of creativity and understanding that I don't have, spatial skills that I don't have. But how do you value that? Well, I think you value it by how you value everything else in K-12, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, and one of the things I am proud of that I did as a principal is, well, we would have signing day, right? Like everybody does, but we started having career signing day for all of our career and technology certifications because those kids were doing amazing things and they should be celebrated just like our athletes were, just like our top 10%, because they're the ones right now. You said it's recession. Guess who's got all the job security?
Yeah.
Our RCTE folks.
No doubt. And you think about, you think about a young woman or a young man who graduates with that skill, goes into the workforce, and they don't wake up at the age of 20, 24 or 25 and I've got a degree and now what? And
right.
I have $100,000 worth of debt, and I have all of these things, and so it's very, very lucrative for kids that are going into the workforce to get that specialized training that they need to be successful and move on. And we have to value that more.
There's no question. So last question I want to throw at you. So you've been here, we've been to some sessions, you've got to hear from some amazing leaders. What's a piece of advice you'd give a brand new or aspiring superintendent who attends conferences? What should they look for? What should they do? What should they seek out?
I think you've got to start with finding those sessions that align to things that you're working on in your district. Don't go chasing things.
Right.
And then also seek out conversations with other superintendents. And that, like, the thing that I love about education, you're not going to find anyone at this conference who's not willing to share something with you. And as long as you approach those conversations as I don't have all the answers and I'm trying to learn and all those, man, the people here are fantastic. And I can't, there is no way I would be even remotely in the ballpark of where I'm at without the help of a lot of other superintendents across the state.
Yeah, there's no question. And I think all of those great leaders and yourself included would tell anyone who's asking, we don't know it all. We've still got a lot to learn, but we'll help you any way that we possibly can.
100%.
Well, to all our viewers, our listeners, please subscribe, hit the like button, put in some comments down there. And Dr. Hallmark, man, I wish we had more time because I was really enjoying our conversation. And to hear you talk about how we need to shift, I think you are dead on. And like you said, the $1 million question is, how do we get everybody on board and understand our need to lean into some of these things and think about how we're assessing, how we're helping kids. So thank you, sir. It was great.
Thank you.
Sealy Tigers.
Produced by Podcast Architects.